Thank you for being here and watching this video. If you enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. I want this channel to be more than just a collection of videos. I want it to be a community where we explore fascinating ideas, discuss them openly, learn from one another, and grow together. So don't stay silent, join the conversation. Marxism, consciousness, and the dangerous appeal of utopian thinking. In modern culture, an unexpected fascination with Marxist ideas has emerged among young people, and research shows something genuinely paradoxical. This trend is most pronounced among affluent youth at elite universities. The people most drawn to the abolition of privilege are often among its primary beneficiaries. That irony is worth sitting with before examining the ideas themselves, because it tells us something important about why Marxism appeals, and why the appeal has almost nothing to do with how the system actually functions when implemented. I consider Marxism genuinely harmful, and I want to explain why carefully rather than dismissively, because the critique deserves to be made with the same seriousness that the ideology's defenders bring to its defense. The first problem is that Marxism ignores human nature. The entire system rests on the assumption that once private property is abolished, people will spontaneously begin acting in the collective interest rather than their own. But this assumption has no support in psychology, anthropology, history, or evolutionary biology. Human beings are not altruistic by default. They are capable of altruism, sometimes extraordinary altruism, but it operates within constraints shaped by millions of years of evolution that did not select for unconditional generosity toward strangers. Here is the point that exposes the contradiction most clearly. Nothing currently prevents anyone from living altruistically. If the Marxist vision of human behavior were accurate, we would already see it expressed voluntarily. We do not at scale, not sustainably, not without the coercive mechanisms that every Marxist state has eventually required to maintain compliance. The second problem is economic, and it is decisive. Without functioning capital markets and a price system, it becomes structurally impossible to determine what should be produced, in what quantities, and at what cost. The price mechanism in market economies is not simply a tool for profit. It is an information system of extraordinary complexity that aggregates the preferences, needs, and resource constraints of billions of people simultaneously. The economist Friedrich Hayek identified this in 1945 as the knowledge problem. No central authority can possess or process the dispersed, local, constantly changing information that prices encode automatically. The Soviet planning apparatus employed hundreds of thousands of economists and still produced chronic shortages of basic goods alongside vast surpluses of unwanted ones. Quality declined because producers had no incentive to improve it. Innovation stalled because there was no mechanism to reward it. The planned economy did not eliminate waste, it institutionalized it. The third problem is political and equally fatal. Marxists consistently underestimate what happens to power when it is concentrated without the counterbalancing mechanisms of private property, independent courts, and competitive markets. Money in a capitalist system disperses power. It allows individuals and organizations to act independently of the state. Remove money, and power does not disappear. It consolidates. In every Marxist system that has been implemented, inequality did not disappear. It transformed. Currency was replaced by access. Access to party membership, to elite stores, to foreign goods, to housing, to travel, to education. Corruption did not vanish. It adapted, operating through networks of favor and connection rather than transparent transactions. The party elite lived in conditions dramatically superior to those of ordinary citizens, justified by the ideology that made this hierarchy invisible by refusing to name it. The fourth problem is the one that history makes impossible to ignore. The concentration of power that Marxist systems require has, without exception, produced repression. The Soviet Gulag system held, at its peak, approximately 18 million people simultaneously. A figure so large it is difficult to comprehend. In China under Mao, estimates of deaths from politically induced famine and political violence ranged from 40 to 80 million. In Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, approximately a quarter of the entire population was killed in 4 years. These are not aberrations or betrayals of the theory. They are the predictable consequence of what happens when an ideological state controls all resources, all institutions, and all legitimate speech simultaneously. Most devastating for Ukraine, while Soviet grain was exported to international markets for foreign currency, millions of Ukrainians starved during the Holodomor of 1932 to 1933, a deliberately engineered famine in which crops were seized from peasants by quota-fulfilling brigades, while people died in villages surrounded by fields they had planted. Ukraine experienced multiple such famines in a short period. The mechanism was simple. The Marxist communist state needed grain, had the power to take it, and did, regardless of what this meant for the people who had grown it. This is not a theoretical concern about what Marxism might do. It is a documented record of what it did. The fifth problem is that the model is structurally utopian, meaning it requires the permanent postponement of its own fulfillment. In the Soviet Union, there were multiple officially announced dates for the arrival of the communist paradise. Each passed without the promised transformation. Like predictions of the end of the world, the dates were simply revised. The gap between the ideology's promises and its deliverables was not a temporary problem of transition. It was inherent to a system that required human nature to be different from what it is. And finally, the most immediate argument for the young people who find Marxism intellectually attractive: under such a system, you would not have the iPhone you used to discover it, the YouTube platform you watch the lecture on, or most of the technology that structures your daily life. Innovation requires incentive. Incentive requires reward. And reward requires the market mechanisms that Marxism abolishes. The creativity, the abundance, and the individual freedom that make intellectual exploration possible are products of the system being critiqued. That is not a small irony. It may be the most important one. Thank you for watching all the way through. I really appreciate you being here. Let me know what you think about the ideas in this video, and feel free to share your own perspective or advice in the comments. I genuinely like to read it. If you enjoyed this kind of content, please like the video and subscribe. My hope is to build not just a channel, but a community where people explore meaningful ideas, exchange thoughts, and grow together. See you in the next videos. Bye.